There is no such thing as everyone's Battlefield. There is, however, my Battlefield and indeed not my Battlefield, usually with a hashtag in front of it to make people feel like they're part of a crowd and making a difference and whatever else. And therein lies the problem for the Battlefield franchise, or one of them. Now this is obviously a problem faced by many a game, but it's especially pronounced in Battlefield at this point, a divisive topic that sees players joining and leaving the series at rapid rates through the years. Other games may fluctuate and alter, gaining and losing fandom from individuals, but usually the core of the community remains to a certain degree. Not so, at least to the same degree, for Battlefield it would seem, although arguably that could be seen as reality or just the opinion of a vocal minority, some of which would have you believe that Battlefield as it was has been killed, and thus Battlefield has stopped being Battlefield. So we have our focus for today's video essay. Not a negative video, but a discussion looking at both sides. When did Battlefield stop being Battlefield, and does that even make sense at all? Can a game ever win with a mass fanbase? Or does it always run the risk of being labelled either not progressive enough or leaving behind its roots? There's a lot to consider for this one, so today, let's talk about Battlefield again. This video is brought to you by the Board of Awesome from the epic people that support the channel on Patreon. And the current goal for the channel is to hit 60k subscribers, currently sitting at 53.4k. So if you're new here or feel like seeing more, hitting that subscribe button would be massively appreciated. Thank you so much. Let me make this clear straight away. This is not a video where I tell you what a good Battlefield is and what a bad Battlefield is. Nor is it one where I say that Battlefield has actually been killed. Besides the fact that I don't think it has, at least not yet, that's entirely the point. My opinion doesn't solely shape that discussion, just as that of any other individual doesn't. It's collective. So, please tell me, as a key part of what we're doing today, which Battlefields you love and hate and why, what you feel Battlefield is, and when it found or lost its way, which will also help us to get a grip on what different players would like to see from the next Battlefield. So let's try to flesh our knowledge out a little bit, and we'll look at the scores for a few Battlefield games on Metacritic. Not the actual critic scores, because that doesn't really matter for our discussion. We'll look at the user scores. Here we go. Now I'm taking all of these from the same platform to keep it somewhat fair. I've chosen PlayStation as it tends to get the most reviews, I think, and I've chosen the latest console release when available. Now let's not avoid the elephant in the room here. Battlefield 5 has a 2.3 user score. Now is the actual quality of the game itself a 2.3 out of 10? Well, pretty much objectively no. I see a 2 out of 10 as being damn near totally unplayable and non-functional, but it does however show that, as we all know, DICE mega dropped the ball on that one. Hence why this discussion about Battlefield changing and losing its magic is being talked about so much more right now than at some points in the past. Although some people liked BF5, it clearly wasn't an overall success. In the same vein, Battlefield Hardline didn't hit the mark for many players, at least at the time, picking up a 5.2 user score. They very definitely tried something different with this one, and it just didn't work out for them. In fact, this Battlefield was more of a spin-off than a main release in a lot of ways, actually developed by Visceral Games rather than DICE. However, some are now looking back at it a bit more fondly, saying it didn't deserve the level of hate that it got. But let's flip the script here and look at the well-received. Battlefield 1 is well documented as being a big commercial success, at least initially around release, and it has a solid 7.9 user score, sitting somewhere around the healthy median score for a Battlefield game, with Bad Company 2, Battlefield 1943 and Battlefield 2 all having scored between 7.8 and 8.5. A quick specific mention does need to be made though for Battlefield 4. Often touted as being a prime example of Battlefield, it only has a 7.1 user score on PlayStation 4, showing that things aren't quite as rosy as some may communicate. Releasing in a poor state has a huge impact and indeed leaves a sour taste in the mouth for some, even once a lot has been fixed. Something DICE could well do with keeping in mind, as it's not as if this isn't a somewhat regular occurrence. And then on top of that, in fact Battlefield 3, another often used example of a great BF game, only has a 7.5 rating. Not terrible, but also not great. All showing that the perspective you can get from a vocal minority or majority, an individual, a mass player base, and whatever else can vary wildly. Feeding our point that looking at it as simply as a certain Battlefield was great and should therefore forever be somewhat replicated, well, it's not a particularly reasonable outlook, which does mean there will be mistakes and stumbles along the way, but the overall frequency and scale of the mistakes should never ever reach those of BF5. 5. If you're curious why I say that, I have 2 videos spanning a combined 47 minutes talking about the whole thing, which I'll try to remember to link to in the description, but if you're interested, yes, I see BF5 as where Battlefield has really lost its way, because besides anything else, the huge amount of public backlash, the poor PR and all of that did do real damage to the franchise, and there's not really a way to put a positive spin on that. But with all of those scores in mind, does that alter your own perception of our discussion? Has Battlefield lost its way or merely gone through the expected journey of alteration for a series that has now spanned 18 years? By the way, I should just mention actually, I'm showing BF5 and BF1 actual gameplay footage today, so you aren't just sat watching all of one game, but I'm saving Hardline and BF4 footage and stuff like that for some other videos coming up, such as a live gameplay or two, so please look out for those. That's why I'm not featuring gameplay from some of these other games today. Anyway, a further point I'd like to raise is the impact of nostalgia and straight up specific personal preference. For example, I love BF1. I think it's an excellent experience in the main. However, am I prone to having to remind myself of the negatives it has when I haven't played it for a while? Yes, absolutely. And are there aspects that the much maligned Battlefield 5 does better? Yes, absolutely. This leads me to a side point that looking at everything as being black and white or good or bad is also flawed. No game is perfect, and it's possible for a so-called bad game to have good points and a so-called good game to have bad points, and neither should be ignored. Furthermore, meaning that some great examples of games from times gone by, if released for the first time now without alteration, would be torn apart because times change, new expectations and standards are formed, and prior hits simply don't meet those anymore, which doesn't detract from what they offered in the first place, but does highlight how games do have to change over time in order to keep up. This can sometimes be misconstrued as developers messing with the formula. There's a very fine line between losing the essence of something and tweaking for improvement. It's a difficult road to walk, and one I don't envy the developers having to. And when they get it right, it's great, such as generally improved movement mechanics through the years. A definite and necessary plus point. Like, I don't miss how BF1 would often make me lie down instead of climbing over something. And I'm sure many of you out there don't miss some clunky movement or gunplay or whatever from some previous BF games that you are still extremely fond of. Even more so if you don't have much of an emotional connection with the game, like I don't with BF4. So when I play that, I can say that at least on console, maybe different on PC, but on console I think it feels awful, in my opinion. Totally dated and lacking a lot of intuitive qualities. But BF4 fans who are used to it or are good at the game or whatever, likely can't relate to what I've just said at all, and that's okay, that's fine. That's pretty much my overall point. Some issues with Battlefield are inexcusable, but many are just the unavoidable preference differences that occur when a game changes so much. What's classified as innovation and what's classified as meddling with the secret sauce? Sometimes it's the same thing, just depending on who you ask. Now, what can have a genuine impact upon the reception of a game is changes to truly core aspects of it, something Battlefield does to a larger degree than a lot of competitors. Call of Duty has changed a decent amount through the years, but COD gunplay is still basically COD gunplay, for example. In fact, the one time it got wildly criticized was when they put in the jump packs and stuff, making the game just too different, changing the flow, and people didn't like it. The rest of the time, it's remained fairly similar. Battlefield, however, has had significant gunplay and overall gameplay shifts. The gunplay in BF4, BF1, and BF5 are all in fairly stark contrast. Gameplay mechanics such as spotting have been anything but consistent, and the basic game design ethos has been altered and reshaped massively. Is it an arcade sandbox? Is it an atmospheric wartime recreation? Is it a basic laser accurate shooter, etc.? Battlefield isn't truly an arcade game or a simulation, and so it is at risk of failing to deliver for a specific audience at times by trying to please everyone. And yes, I'm heavily referencing Battlefield 5 again here. A game made for everyone often pleases no one, and especially not your consistent hardcore audience. A clear design direction is key, and so with shifting tones, different standard modes, different team mechanics, different gunplay and whatever else, it's basically unavoidable we end up with assertions that BF at times isn't what it used to be or BF is dead, whether it's true or not. And these assertions are even more prevalent and arguably valid when the series takes a big fall on a specific entry. It's a complicated game. So tell me, what is Battlefield for you, considering everything I've said today? Is it what we have now? Is it what we've had before? Is all of it Battlefield? And what do you want from the future? All answers are valid as long as they're logical and respectful, and feel free to discuss all of it at length with each other in the comments below. And so, if you enjoyed the video, hitting the like button and subscribing would be massively appreciated, and thank you so very much. I'm going to be streaming here and on Twitch soon, so follow me on Twitch in the description and my pinned comment, where you can also find other links to my other social media as well. But with that all said, I'm GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters. So it's certainly unusual for it to now be sometimes topping the Twitch directory after having been near totally forgotten about just a few months ago. And well, that's the beauty of the internet and content creation.